You can learn a surprising amount about a person by the way they live when no one is watching. Step into someone's home, and you're not just entering a physical space. You're stepping into a reflection of their internal world. For some people, everything feels intentional. The floor is spotless, the counters are clear, the air itself seems organized. For others, it's entirely different. Clothes rest where they were dropped days ago. Dishes remain untouched in the sink. Dust gathers quietly in corners. Half-finished tasks linger across every surface. To most people, the explanation feels obvious: laziness, a lack of discipline, carelessness. But psychology rarely rewards simple conclusions. Because when someone consistently avoids cleaning their house, the mess is usually not the problem itself. It is often the visible symptom of something much deeper happening beneath the surface. Most people assume cleaning is a basic act of responsibility, and on the surface it is. But psychologically, cleaning is not just about wiping surfaces or organizing objects. It requires executive function, the mental system responsible for planning, initiating tasks, sustaining attention, and completing sequences of action. When executive function is compromised by stress, exhaustion, emotional overload, or chronic mental fatigue, even the smallest tasks begin to feel strangely impossible. This is why some people can handle demanding jobs, maintain conversations, solve complex problems, and still stare at a pile of dishes for hours without touching them. It isn't because they don't know what needs to be done. It's because their mind is already operating at full capacity. Adding one more task, even something seemingly simple, feels like psychological friction their system can no longer overcome. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human behavior. People often mistake task avoidance for indifference, when in reality it is frequently the result of invisible overload. The brain prioritizes what feels most urgent for survival. If someone is managing chronic anxiety, processing emotional pain, dealing with burnout, or simply navigating prolonged stress, their mind quietly reallocates resources. It focuses on maintaining basic psychological stability. Everything else becomes secondary. Cleaning, because it offers delayed rather than immediate relief, often gets pushed to the bottom of the list. Over time, this postponement compounds. What began as one undone task becomes 10, then 20. Eventually, the environment itself starts reflecting the internal backlog of unresolved strain. There is also an emotional dimension people rarely consider. Cleaning often forces confrontation. Every object carries psychological weight. Sorting through clutter means facing postponed decisions. Throwing things away means letting go. Rearranging space often means acknowledging change. For someone already avoiding difficult emotions, cleaning can unconsciously feel threatening. The mess becomes a protective layer, a way of postponing psychological contact with discomfort. This is why some people feel irrational resistance when they try to clean. The resistance is not really about the task itself. It is about what the task awakens emotionally. A stack of unopened mail may represent anxiety about finances. A pile of old clothes may carry memories tied to a previous version of self. Disorder often becomes emotional archaeology, and not everyone feels ready to excavate what is buried there. Another major factor is environmental sensitivity. Not everyone experiences mess the same way. Some people feel immediate internal discomfort when a room becomes disorganized. Their nervous system reacts strongly to visual disorder. They feel distracted, unsettled, even emotionally agitated until order is restored. Others adapt quickly. Their brain simply filters the mess out. After enough exposure, they stop consciously noticing it. This difference is neurological, not moral. One person feels tension every time they walk into a cluttered room. Another feels almost nothing. Both experiences are real. And this mismatch often causes conflict because each person assumes their response is universal. Then there are people whose minds are simply wired toward internal stimulation rather than external maintenance. These individuals often live deeply inside thought. Their attention is absorbed by ideas, imagination, reflection, creativity, or analysis. Physical surroundings become secondary. They may spend hours solving abstract problems, reading, writing, building concepts in their mind, all while sitting in a visibly chaotic environment. To outsiders, this seems contradictory. How can someone capable of such focus ignore something so obvious. But psychologically, their reward system is prioritizing mental engagement over environmental upkeep. Their house does not feel like an extension of identity in the way it does for others. Their sense of self is invested elsewhere. Ironically, some of the messiest people are also perfectionists. This sounds contradictory, but it makes psychological sense. Perfectionism often creates paralysis. If someone believes cleaning must be done completely or not at all, starting becomes overwhelming. Washing one dish feels pointless if the whole kitchen cannot be restored perfectly. Folding a few clothes feels insufficient if the room remains cluttered. The brain rejects partial progress because it does not satisfy the internal standard. So instead of beginning imperfectly, the person does nothing. What looks like laziness is often perfectionism disguised as avoidance. Burnout intensifies all of this. Emotional exhaustion changes how effort feels. Tasks that once required little thought begin to feel enormous. Cleaning becomes one more demand in a life already full of demands. And because there is no immediate external consequence, it is sacrificed first. Many people living in visible disorder are not lazy at all. They are depleted. They are preserving what little energy remains for survival, work, family obligations, or emotional recovery. Their home quietly absorbs what their nervous system can no longer manage. There is also the power of adaptation. Humans normalize repeated conditions with remarkable speed. If a home remains messy long enough, disorder stops feeling temporary. It becomes familiar. And familiarity often feels safer than change. This is why some people feel strangely uncomfortable after finally cleaning their space. Order feels unfamiliar, almost sterile. The mess had become part of the emotional landscape. Removing it creates subtle psychological disorientation. This does not mean disorder is healthier. It means the nervous system had adjusted to it. Social judgment often makes things worse. Shame rarely produces sustainable behavioral change. In fact, it often reinforces avoidance. The more someone feels judged for their living space, the more emotionally loaded cleaning becomes. What could have been a practical task becomes proof of failure. The brain resists tasks associated with self-criticism. And so the cycle continues. Avoidance creates mess, mess creates shame, shame increases avoidance. This is why real change begins with understanding rather than condemnation. When people identify the psychological reason behind their avoidance, whether it is overload, emotional resistance, perfectionism, burnout, sensory differences, or unresolved stress, they regain agency. The problem becomes understandable, and what is understandable becomes workable. Cleaning stops being a moral test and becomes an act of psychological support. Because in truth, a messy house is rarely just a messy house. It is often a map, a visible record of invisible processes, stress carried too long, emotions postponed too often, energy stretched too thin, standards set impossibly high, or a mind simply wired to prioritize different forms of order. If you learn to read that map carefully, judgment becomes curiosity, and curiosity creates compassion. Personally, I've always found it revealing how quickly people assume a messy house reflects laziness, when often it reflects exhaustion no one else can see. Sometimes what looks like neglect is actually survival in disguise, and maybe that's worth remembering. Behind every cluttered room, there is usually a story the room itself cannot explain, but psychology often can.